Hello everybody, I'm Mango Thunderslice, and today's video is NYX, how to keep the light in a world of darkness. And we're going to talk about the dark night of the soul. And last video was soul, right? It was all about the power of the sun and the genuine authenticity of beings who are aligned with that primordial cosmic force. But at the same time, there are other primordial cosmic forces, including that of darkness, that of night, right? Nyx is not actually Latin, it's Greek, ancient Greek for night, and it is one of the primordial deities that emerged from chaos. And, chaos gave birth to the night and to darkness, Nyx and Erebus. And through Nyx and Erebus, they were siblings as well as consorts. This was before the world was created. Incest wasn't a bad thing. So Erebus and Nyx created, several sub-deities within the Greek pantheon and mythology, including ether, right? And, ether was one of the first of the high sky, of the air that the gods breathe, of that substance that is above what we know of as our normal sky and our normal atmosphere. Even in the ancient Greeks, they absolutely apprehended, the difference between space and, the ether and the atmosphere that they were imbibing. And to them, we like to poo-poo and demean the old mythologies as just this daytime TV for the ancients, just like, oh, they were just making sense out of their world because they were just a bunch of dumb, naked apes and walking around, and they just came up with all these funny stories, right? But they're far more consequential than that, and they have far more coherence than any of the narratives you're going to find in the modern world, that's for sure. At least any of those that are popular and promoted by the imperial media. But it is very much worthwhile to study mythology and to consider that the gods were acknowledged by the ancients to be the planets, right? So why would the ancients have this whole, procession and chain of consequence with all these characters, representing the planets, right? We in the sky, the planets are these tiny lights, hardly differential from stars. They're just like bright stars. But the ancients talked about the planets, the gods, as if they were personalities that were very close to Earth. So again, it really brings into light that of, the adjunct kind of electric universe, theories, which is the Saturn configuration theory, that Earth was once a moon of Saturn, and Saturn itself was kind of aligned with the sun, as was Jupiter, in rather not the disk, but in kind of a line along the axis of the sun. What is known as a Herbig-Haro object, which in cosmology, and essentially over the solar system's evolution, of the sun's evolution, the Earth and Saturn kind of came into a new configuration. Jupiter, who is Zeus, overthrew Cronus, who is Saturn. And Cronus was, the god, the great son of the Golden Age, right? So they, in Greek mythology, they have a previous age where essentially Cronus was the god of the world, and then Zeus came in, Jupiter overthrew it, battle of Mount Olympus, and basically, Zeus became the head of the pantheon. And again, all of this is very strange to us because it's foreign to our experience. But they're telling us a story, they're telling us the history of this planet, and they're telling us that, we used to be in a very different configuration, and life on this planet used to be very different. We consider the aspect of the dinosaurs who, in current gravitational circumstances simply could not exist. Brachiosaurus, there's so much weight at such an angle, it would be physically impossible for it to lift its neck. So it belies the past instance of a condition of lower gravity on this planet, so either this planet was a different size, or it was, in some sort of different electrical configuration with its, with the surrounding planets and Saturn, that it just had less of a gravitational field for some reason. When all that they can offer us is, it's bending space-time, 'cause mass. Well, then we can speculate without fear of being called fools, because it's insanely foolish to believe that mainstream science today has any understanding of gravity or light or electromagnetism or electricity or anything else for that matter. It's all these crayon level superstitions and suppositions that can't be actually empirically verified beyond just, the circle jerk, imperial academic media and their peer review process, right? Peer review from people that we all hand selected. I call that a circle jerk. But again, the science is coming through. It's just not getting coverage, and we are discovering proofs every single day that this world is electric. And so again, it's very interesting to consider the knowledge of the ancients, because to them this was a given fact, right? All of the ancient mythologies talk about the electrical power of the universe, and theosophy specifically, Blavatsky talked a lot about Fohat and the electrical force that powers consciousness and life in the universe. And so there's this primordial chaos, yes, but from it emerges an order, right? And this flow of energy, right? The night and the darkness which is the pure potential, gave birth to the ether, which was space and the activation of space, and eventually all the way down to Zeus and basically the filling in, all the associate deities of this world being filled out and populated and, developed and refined to the point that we have this world. And we like to think that we know the timeline of these things. We really don't, because if everything's based on carbon dating, which is based off of the half-life and the radioactive decay of an element, what if we're totally wrong in assuming that the radioactive decay rate of an element is constant throughout, millions or billions of years? Wouldn't, if we're understanding that, there can be periods of intense overactive electromagnetic radiation coming down to the planet, of severe periods of charged particle storms and induction, why it would very much stand to reason that, carbon-14 and other elements would degrade faster during these periods of intense electrical stress. So the whole assumption that everything in the universe is just this one gradual, process is totally fallacious. It is maybe sometimes gradual, but it is also punctuated by catastrophes. And so, and in the human scale, what's interesting about human psychology is all these gods and deities and demons and angels, they still exist, but they've all been internalized. And yes, the planets are out there in the far reaches of the solar system, right? Cronus was banished to Tartarus, and but we have the memory of all of those lessons, of all those experiences, our ancestral racial memory, right? The people of the British Isles have a different, inborn genetic memory than the people who grew up in, the Congo, right? It's just different soul paths. And, there is no necessary claim to superiority of one of the soul paths over another, but it is, I think, safe to claim that those who appreciate that the soul exists and that there is more than the physical realm, those who are committed to increasing this world, those who are good people, as we know the word, who are trying to increase the world, right? They are people of the light, right? And, there's light-skinned people, but mainly what I'm talking about is the people whose souls are of the light, those who are carrying the light. And, the fire, if you will, but I think the light is more accurate, because fire is just one type of light, and it is not necessarily the same type of fire as the sun. There's the small fire, and there's what was it in Japanese 5 elements, there's the lesser fire and the greater fire. And, I think that's the distinction between combustion and plasma fusion. And, again, the ancients had it all figured out ontologically down to its raw elements, and then we discarded it all, and now we're in, through our most advanced science, we're finding that they were actually correct. And so, it makes you wonder how long our history truly is on this planet. But, we've done other videos for that. But the point is to realize that there are all these traumas that have happened through all these cataclysms, many of which weren't even our fault. They were totally, planetary catastrophes and climate shifts, and maybe people became far more brutal and violent and vicious as a result of a climate collapse because they did what they had to survive, right? Even in, within the last, 1,200 years in the British Isles, back in the medieval times, the Danes, right, were invading Britain because they couldn't grow enough food on the mainland, and there was competition for resources. And so even though the weather's not super great on these British Isles, you could grow food and you could defend it. And so, islands have been very prominent throughout the ancient times for that reason. But when we acknowledge that there are ancestral traumas and that everyone is kind of it's like the Buddhists say, everything is suffering, but everyone is kind of a Stockholm syndrome. Everybody's kind of gun shy and shell-shocked from things that happened in our distant past, and it's the basis of our fear and anxieties. And at the same time, we have become stronger as a species. We came out of paradise and we were thrust into this world where we, work by the sweat of our brow, and we experience pain and suffering, and we know a little bit about the tree of knowledge and the good and evil and what the consequences of them are. And we go through our own night of the soul, right? The dark night of the soul is a period of self-doubt and stress and anxiety and depression. And it's usually described by religious people to talk about how they fell away from religion and then they found their way back, and their faith was ever stronger. But it applies just in general psychology. Timothy Leary talked about, the ego death and ego loss during the psychedelic trips, of realizing essentially it's where you lose your illusions, right? When we're born, we're taught all these illusions in school. There's only a few things that I was taught in school that I haven't been able to disprove. And, they're so basic and uncontroversial that's why nobody lies. That's why Wikipedia is good for all the things that are not controversial. I mean, try looking up anything that's controversial and you're going to get some, commie propaganda, masquerading as an encyclopedia entry. But that's besides the point. But, it is to the point that the dark night of the soul is a consequence of living in a world of fraud and illusion, as we've talked about in the last video, and it can be very depressing, especially if you've never encountered the light, if you've never learned how to spark the lighter, if you've never learned how to turn your mirror to the sun and, be the source of the light, not just wandering in the darkness. And, I definitely went through my dark night of the soul. I was an atheist for most of my life. I've always been left brain dominant. I told my dad that I didn't believe in God in first grade or third, in elementary school, because I didn't want to go to Sunday school anymore. It was like we're just watching VeggieTales and they're telling me not to be a bad person and not to murder people and not to steal. It's like, okay, message received. Can I stop doing this now? I've got other things I want to do. And in school they really make it seem like the smartest people are those who completely cast aside religion and completely mock the idea of a god. But it's not as reasonable as they try and cast it in the university. And there's a reason that the university systematically tries to cast religion in a negative light and to make it ridiculous that there is a prime cosmic intelligence that is organizing everything and created this universe. And the religious people might object to me and my wording of God in that term, but again, I consider myself a Christian, but I don't consider myself any particular denomination. I think that pretty much everyone in the Piscean age was totally deluded and confused, and that was part of it was we're coming out of the dark age. Some would say we're going into a dark age. Really depends on how optimistic you are about this coming and current confrontation, because it is the battle of good against evil. And it's important to realize that darkness per se is not evil, right? The nighttime is not evil, right? It's just the other side of the coin of the cosmic creation. It is a fundamental part of divine reality. Darkness isn't intrinsically something that is the domain of evil. They usually, those who are evil really resonate with darkness because you can get away with things more. You can be observed less in the darkness. You can hide, and thus escape accountability for your actions, perhaps. And, there's a lot of creatures of the night that are, very, scary looking and predatory, but ultimately the night is only scary because it takes away our sense of perception. We find ourselves less able to see what is around us when it is dark. And, the media tries to keep us in darkness by controlling the narrative and the information flow. They can't control the information flow anymore because of the internet, but they can control the narrative, or at least they used to be able to control the narrative. And now they've just started pumping out pure absurdity to the point where nobody even cares or knows what the truth is anymore. And that's exactly where they want us, totally disconnected from even the concept of truth and the ability to perceive it anywhere. So it's how they can get away saying that, oh yeah, the George Floyd protests, they didn't lead to any coronavirus spike, but those who were protesting the lockdown and those who went to pubs and bars, they're the cause of the great second wave, which there is no second wave, right? The total deaths are higher than I might have originally, guessed in my other video. I also said that by July, people would have totally forgotten this thing in the main part, and that's not necessarily true. I will say that everybody with a brain has already emotionally let go of the fear that is coronavirus. There's nothing to be afraid of unless you're an elderly person who has comorbidities, and if you live in a democratic state where they're going to send COVID positive people into your nursing home and wipe your grandma out because they want to increase the death toll, and or they're fundamentally incompetent, and or any number of different explanations, none of which are good. And the media tells us that it's all Trump's fault, right? And Trump, for the millionth time, doesn't make all perfect decisions, and I definitely disagree with a lot of the people he's endorsing, as far as down ballot elections throughout the country. But people, I have faith in the people. I have faith in people's ability to check the narrative and to shine light into that darkness. And, it is happening. And it's the thing, again, that they fear is not the angry conspiracy theorists telling everyone that the earth is flat and that the Jews control everything. What they fear are people who are people who are genuinely transcending this entire structure and program, and who are actually building the new world, who have fallen out of the program and are now, we're building an entirely new construct. And that is what, we are doing around here. We are building an entirely new world. We're not troubling ourselves with, people who not only are in darkness, but seem to enjoy being in darkness. They've been in darkness their entire life, and so it's just comfortable to them. It's like kind of how I feel about people who grew up in cities. It's like you've become accustomed to this place, like you have no connection with the outside world. And there's people who grew up in cities and they love it, but in general I only see happiness in people who are connected to nature and the land and to God and to their chain link within this great structure of time and reality, who have a connection to their parents, who have a connection to their children, who revel in virtue, right? So those are the people who I see are genuinely happy. And there's a lot of things that people make fun of religious people for, but it's just like, at least they control their environment and they put themselves around people who make them happy. And that is something that I have to give them credit for. I have to give anybody credit for. So yeah, the dark night of the soul, it is really, for me, psychedelics did play a part in coming out of it. It was the first time I took mushrooms, it was the first time in my life I had ever felt religious and just spiritual. I just felt like I knew everything, and I just connected with like another part of my brain, like my right brain, which had just been shut off for years. It felt like all of a sudden I was able to feel everything, and it was marvelous. And I was still an atheist at that time, but it was really a transcendent experience. And then it was the fifth time. Don't ask me how many, because I don't know. But fifth time, that's when I actually was just, I think, watching a movie or just laying out on the couch, and I really considered, I was like, Mango, you're really trying to disprove God, but really God is just a word. And so what is your definition of this word? And I was like, well, I'm using the definition that, I'm being told, right, by both the atheists and by the religious people. And, and myself said to myself, there's your problem, bud. You haven't defined your term. And so, basically I set out to define the term, and I reduced it down to essentially, if there is no intelligence connecting the universe, if we just define God as an intelligence that created the universe and is all present within it, then that would imply that something beyond random chance is at play, right? So spoken in the inverse, if God does not exist, then we must be able to positively prove that random chance is the governing operative principle in all physical interactions and transactions in the universe. And it's exactly at that point that you stop being an atheist, and you realize I cannot prove that at all. There is literally not one shred of evidence in this universe that everything is governed by random chance. And the closer you look, the more you'll find the exact opposite. That there's small choices being made by intelligence of various forms at all levels of creation, from the galactic down to the subatomic, right? Everything is in a proper order that is preordained. And everything is about, basically reactivity and choice and potential. And it is not at all a matter of random bumping particles. This whole worldview and paradigm is coming crashing down right now. And so the light is shining on this world. The light of God is shining on this world to bring people out of their darkness and let people know that they are not alone. They are not disconnected. This life is not random. And that, yes, this intelligence that binds and created the entire universe loves you. And it loves its creations. And it even allows evil to proceed so that we can learn the lesson for ourselves. How good a parent is that? Some people think, why doesn't God stop all the evil? It's like, you remember when your parents tried to keep you from doing things because they thought they were keeping you safe and preventing you from getting harmed? Yeah, right. How much did you like it? The good parent is the one who gives their child latitude to learn their own lessons, who provides them with enough instruction at the formative level to basically give them the roadmap to everything else that comes after, and to deal with it in some way, to learn how to deal with it and learn to become closer to God as a part of that. And so that is what the universe is for. It's a sandbox. It's a lesson learning experiment by the Creator to know himself better, or herself if you want to go, but it's the gender of God is in the Trinity. It's not exactly a singularity. And that's essentially it. Realize that you are not alone. You are not all connected, and come out of the darkness. Realize that you are more powerful than you have any idea than you had before. And that you have power to change this world. And that you will, as long as you lose your fear and you become basically the video game character, the protagonist of your own story. And life becomes amazing. It becomes meaningful. It becomes fun. You find your fellow quest mates. You find your partners in adventure, and it's all worthwhile because you see how it affects everything, for generations and all time to come. And you have participated in the field of God, negentropy, and increased the refinement of this world, even if you wasted some thermal energy here and there. Hey, we all do. So that's essentially the nature of the true spirituality. It does align with many other religious lines, but it's important to remember the energetic transaction and the flow of energy in and the flow of energy out. If you can focus on your own vortex, that's really, everything else will follow, right? It's self-interest in the divine sense, because I am of God. So, hope you guys are having a good one. I'll see you next time. Cheers.